I've worked with hundreds of people, but only one made me walk away from everything.
Aaron Kaufman always seemed like the quiet genius, the guy who let his work speak while everyone else took the spotlight. But behind the calm attitude and grease-covered hands was a growing tension that fans never fully saw. For years, viewers believed he and one man were inseparable, the perfect duo holding everything together. What they didn't realize was how fast things were falling apart behind the scenes. Pressure built, respect faded, and frustration quietly turned into something much darker. By the time it was over, many were left wondering how a partnership that looked unbreakable could end with so much bitterness, and why Aaron seemed to walk away without ever looking back. For a long time, fans thought they understood the dynamic. One guy talked big, sold hard, and soaked up the spotlight. The other stayed quiet, head down, turning rusted wrecks into masterpieces. On screen, it looked balanced, almost perfect. But off-camera, that balance was slowly breaking down, and Aaron Kaufman felt it more than anyone else. What most viewers didn't realize is that Aaron wasn't just the talent in the shop. He was carrying the most demanding part of the work. While the show leaned into fast deadlines and dramatic reveals, Aaron was the one expected to make impossible builds actually function. Cars that should have taken months were suddenly expected in days, and the pressure never stopped. Over time, that grind started to change how he saw the entire operation. The real issue wasn't fame or money. It was control. Decisions were being made faster, louder, and higher up the chain, and Aaron felt boxed into a role that no longer respected how he worked, or what he valued. The relationship that once looked like a partnership began to feel more like an order being handed down. And when respect starts to disappear, frustration doesn't always show up as anger. Sometimes it shows up as silence. Fans noticed it before they understood it. Aaron spoke less. His energy shifted. The chemistry felt forced. Something was clearly off, but no one knew how deep it went yet. And the man at the center of it all? He either didn't see the damage forming or saw it and kept pushing anyway. And that's where the real divide began. By the time the cameras started rolling each season, the image was already locked in. Viewers were watching a polished version of reality, one where chaos felt fun and pressure felt temporary. But behind that version was a schedule that never let up. The shop wasn't just building cars anymore, it was feeding a television machine that demanded constant tension, faster turnarounds, and bigger moments every episode. For Aaron, that pressure hit differently. He wasn't chasing screen time or catchphrases. His reputation came from precision, patience, and doing things the right way. But TV doesn't reward patience. It rewards speed, conflict, and spectacle. Builds were being rushed, shortcuts were quietly expected, and mistakes became inevitable. Each time something went wrong, the stress doubled. Because it wasn't just a failed part, it was a blown deadline in front of millions. What made it worse was how the responsibility was divided. When deadlines were met, the show moved on. When they weren't, the weight fell on the guy actually holding the tools. Aaron started feeling like the pressure was one-sided. He was expected to deliver perfection while the rules around him kept changing. That kind of imbalance doesn't create motivation, it creates resentment. And here's where things got uncomfortable. Aaron later hinted that the environment no longer matched his values, especially when it came to how people were treated behind the scenes. That's not something you forget or shrug off. When a workplace crosses from intense into exhausting and from challenging into draining, even the calmest person starts thinking about escape. But walking away from a hit show isn't easy. Not when your face is part of its identity, and not when the real breaking point was still ahead. Everything finally came to a head with a single build that fans still talk about today. On the surface, it was just another ambitious project. Big name, big expectations, big reveal. But behind the scenes, it exposed every problem that had been building for years. The timeline was aggressive, the expectations were sky high, and the room for error was basically non-existent. For Aaron, it wasn't exciting anymore. It was exhausting. This build forced him into a corner. He was expected to deliver craftsmanship at a level he was proud of, but within limits, that made that almost impossible. Corners had to be cut. Compromises had to be made. And for someone who built his entire reputation on doing things right, that felt like a line being crossed. It wasn't about ego, it was about integrity. What hurt most wasn't just the work itself, but how the concerns were handled. Aaron reportedly pushed back, questioning timelines and decisions, only to feel like his voice didn't carry the weight it once did. The conversation had shifted. What used to feel like collaboration now felt like direction. And once that happens, trust doesn't just weaken, it starts to disappear. Viewers noticed something was off. The tension wasn't dramatic or explosive, but it was heavy. Conversations felt shorter. Reactions felt forced. Aaron's passion looked muted, like he was already halfway out the door. That's when fans began asking questions, even if they didn't know what to ask yet. Because this wasn't just another stressful week. It was the moment Aaron realized the situation wasn't going to change, and that staying meant sacrificing the very thing that made him who he was. And once that realization hits, there's no going back. After that breaking point, the shift in the relationship became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a loud fallout with shouting matches or public insults. It was colder than that. Communication thinned out. Conversations became strictly about work. The easy back and forth that once held everything together was gone, replaced by a stiff, professional distance that said more than any argument ever could. What made the situation even more uncomfortable were the comments that surfaced later. Aaron spoke carefully, but his words carried weight. He explained that he and the other man simply saw the world differently, especially when it came to people, priorities, and how relationships should be handled. That kind of statement doesn't come from a single bad day. It comes from months, even years, of feeling unheard and undervalued. Then came the contrast in how the relationship was described from the other side. When the idea of a close friendship was pushed back on publicly, it hit fans hard. The message was clear. What viewers thought was a brotherhood was to some just a business arrangement. For Aaron, that framing likely stung more than any argument ever could. Being reduced to a role after helping build something massive changes how you see everything. This is where the hate narrative really took hold, not because of explosive drama, but because of emotional disconnect. When respect fades and personal bonds are rewritten after the fact, resentment has room to grow. Silence replaces honesty. Distance replaces trust. And once a partnership reaches that stage, there's no dramatic repair moment waiting. There's only one option left: walk away, rebuild, and never look back. By the time the exit became official, fans were scrambling for answers. Aaron didn't burn bridges or throw accusations around. Instead, he did something that felt even more telling. He stayed calm, measured, and distant. No emotional goodbye, no dramatic explanation, just a quiet step away from something that had clearly taken more from him than it gave back. That silence is a big reason people began interpreting the situation as something stronger than frustration. When someone leaves a massive platform without looking back, it sends a message. Aaron made it clear that the decision wasn't sudden or impulsive. He described it as something that had been building for a long time, a slow realization that he couldn't continue in an environment that no longer aligned with who he was or how he wanted to work. What really fueled speculation was how clean the break felt. No collaborations, no public reconciliations, no nostalgic throwbacks. In the world of reality TV, where former cast members often circle back for ratings or closure, Aaron's absence stood out. It felt intentional, almost final. Meanwhile, fans noticed how differently each side spoke about the past. One focused on business and logistics. The other focused on values, people, and respect. That contrast alone was enough to keep theories alive. Because when two people remember the same chapter in completely different ways, it usually means something deeper went wrong. At that point, hate became the word viewers used, not because Aaron said it, but because of what he didn't say. And sometimes, the strongest emotions are the ones left completely unspoken. What happened next only made the divide feel even deeper. After leaving, Aaron didn't chase the same spotlight or try to recreate what he walked away from. Instead, he moved in the opposite direction. Smaller teams, different projects, more control. It was a clear signal that his exit wasn't about fame. It was about freedom. And that choice spoke louder than any interview ever could. As time passed, fans expected some kind of acknowledgement, a reunion, a shared photo, a casual comment clearing the air. None of that came. The silence stretched on, and with every year that passed, it felt less accidental. In a world where nostalgia is often monetized, choosing not to look back is a powerful statement. It suggested that whatever happened behind the scenes wasn't something Aaron wanted to reopen, even for the sake of fans. Meanwhile, the legacy of the show continued without him, but many viewers noticed something was missing. The builds felt different. The dynamic shifted. Whether people admitted it or not, Aaron's absence left a gap that couldn't be edited around. That only reinforced the idea that his role had been far more important than some were willing to admit at the time. This is where perception turned into belief. Fans didn't need a public feud to draw conclusions. The lack of reconciliation, the separate paths, and the way the past was carefully avoided all fed the same narrative. Not explosive anger, but a hard line drawn in silence. And when someone chooses peace over revisiting the past, it doesn't mean the damage wasn't real. Sometimes it means it was deep enough that walking away was the only way to heal. Looking back now, the story feels less like a personal feud and more like a collision between two very different mindsets. One side thrived on momentum, risk, and keeping the machine moving forward. The other valued craftsmanship, intention, and respect for the process. Those differences don't always clash at first, but over time they grind against each other until something breaks. That's why the question of hate is so complicated. Aaron never needed to say the word for people to feel it. The distance, the lack of warmth, and the refusal to romanticize the past told its own story. When someone helps build something from the ground up and then walks away without sentiment, it usually means the emotional cost was too high to ignore. What fans often miss is that walking away can be an act of self-preservation, not bitterness. Choosing not to revisit old chapters doesn't mean you're angry. It can mean you've already made peace in private. But to the outside world, that calm detachment looks cold. And cold gets interpreted as hate. In the end, the most revealing part of this story isn't what was said, it's what never was. No dramatic closure, no shared stage, no public reunion to rewrite the narrative. Just two paths that never crossed again. That silence left room for speculation, and speculation turned into belief. So whether it was resentment, disappointment, or something deeper, one thing is clear. Whatever happened was strong enough to end a partnership millions believed would last forever. And sometimes, that's all the proof people need. In the end, this story was never about one explosive argument or a single moment of betrayal. It was about pressure, shifting values, and a partnership that slowly stopped feeling equal. Aaron Kaufman didn't walk away in anger. He walked away in silence, and that silence spoke volumes. Whether fans call it hate, resentment, or simply being done, the outcome was the same, a clean break with no desire to look back. And sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what someone says after it's over. It's the fact they never say anything at all.